Yo, what's up, guys? It's Noah here, breaking down the NFL slate on Draftkings and Yahoo for Week 11. I'm going to give some of my final thoughts. We're going to take a final look at this Week 11 slate. I am recording this video on Friday afternoon. Since I recorded my first look video on Tuesday, as the week's gone on, I've done a pretty good job of narrowing down my player pool. I have a pretty good idea of who I'm going to have exposure to this week. I'm going to talk about 4 or 5 guys at each position that I like the most. We'll talk about DraftKings and Yahoo, obviously. We'll take a look at some of the implied totals for this week, talk about the games that have the highest projected totals. We'll look at snap counts from last week, look at guys that maybe could be seeing an increased role due to injuries. We do have a pretty good understanding of who's going to be in and out this week. There's only one big injury I think we're really waiting on as of Friday, and that's Emmanuel Sanders. That's an injury that's going to open up a lot of value if he is out, and we will talk about some of those value plays. As we go through each position, we will bid out a core of 5 players. These are 5 players that I like the most. We'll have a DraftKings specific core and then a Yahoo specific core as well. Just a couple things before we do get started with the video. As always, I would greatly appreciate it if you would drop a like down below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well if you have not already. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at DFS by Noah. I am very active over on Twitter. You can give me a follow over there. Another thing, for those of you that don't watch my NBA videos, maybe you only watch my NFL videos, I will have Patreon exclusive content launching at the beginning of December, most likely either December 1st or December 2nd. I'll have NFL exclusive content. I'll have private videos, articles that I'll write myself. I'm going to have like an ownership show where I talk about who I expect to be the highest owned players at each position. I'll have a roster construction show where I talk about roster builds, how we should be constructing our lineups for cash games, where we can look for potential GPP pivots. All that exclusive content will be over on Patreon, launching at the beginning of December. I'm very excited to start this Patreon content. I'm going to put a lot of time and effort into this. I will have packages for NFL and NBA. I'll have a bundle package where you can get both sports for a cheaper price. I'll keep you guys updated as we do get closer to the launch date. Just wanted to inform inform some of you that maybe don't watch my NBA videos. But let's go ahead and take a look at this Week 11 slate. We'll start off at quarterback, and then we'll work our way through each position. So at quarterback this week, I have a pretty good understanding of who I'm going to have the most exposure to. For cash games, I'm probably going to be saving with Kyle Allen. I think he's the guy that I like the most as a value quarterback. 5,300 at home against the Falcons. He just really stands out as one of the top value quarterbacks on the slate. We know how bad this Falcons defense is, especially against the pass. The Panthers do have a pretty high implied team total, which is always something I look for. Right now, they do have a 26.5 implied team total, opened up at 28.5. Still a high total though in this game, 49.5 point total. The Panthers are 4-point favorites. So really good spot for Kyle Allen. He's still dirt cheap on DraftKings. Had his first 300-yard game last week against Green Bay. I think he keeps that up this week. I could easily see him going for 300 yards and multiple touchdowns. I feel like he's probably going to be my core play at quarterback this week, especially for cash games. Now for GPPs, you can obviously pay up for guys like Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson. I think Lamar Jackson's a GPP guy I'm going to have exposure to. It's going to be hard to get him in cash games just because I think Kyle Allen probably projects as one of the best point per dollar quarterbacks, and he'll probably be the guy that I use in cash. But obviously Lamar Jackson, a great GPP play. I mean, this guy just gives you such a high ceiling. This game between the Texans and the Ravens does have one of the highest totals on the slate. I believe it actually has the highest total at 51. So this is for sure going to want to be a game you get some exposure to. Lamar Jackson, 7,700, for sure in play at quarterback this week. The guy I want to talk about over on Yahoo, Jameis Winston, I think is a really good play on DraftKings as well at 6,500. I really like him here on Yahoo, though. He's probably going to be my core quarterback over on Yahoo at $31. If you just compare his price to some of the other guys, he's the same price as Tom Brady. I'd much rather have Winston in that situation. He's $1 more than Allen, $1 more than Garoppolo. I think I'd still take Winston over those guys. And you just look at the values at quarterback on Yahoo, there's not a ton of great value I see. Allen is in play at 27 if you want to use him. Derek Carr at home against the Bengals is definitely in a good spot and could be in play at $27. Kyler Murray's in a really tough matchup, but he's very cheap at $25. And we know Kyler Murray just gives you a ton of upside. But I really like Winston at 31 here. The way you beat this Saints team is through the air. They're a tough team to run on. I don't see Ronald Jones having as much success this week as he did last week. Much tougher matchup here. We know Winston's going to throw the ball a ton. I believe Tampa Bay, they're underdogs in this game right now. Let me double check on that real quick. I'm pretty sure they're home dogs, yeah. 5.5 point dogs, so they should have to throw. Jameis Winston at $31 is a guy that I like quite a bit over on Yahoo. And then obviously like Lamar Jackson, you could pay up for in tournaments, but there's usually always like underpriced QBs on Yahoo that I try and go to, and Winston's kind of the guy I'm keying in on over there. Going back to DraftKings though, obviously you could play Winston at 6,500 if you wanted to go there. I think Derek Carr is probably another value I'll be looking to, 6,100 at home against the Bengals. He makes a lot of sense as a tournament play this week because I expect Josh Jacobs to be one of the highest owned running backs on the slate. And if Josh Jacobs busts, that probably means that Derek Carr is putting up a big game and getting all the touchdowns. And you could gain a lot of leverage on the field going with Derek Carr and then fading Josh Jacobs. So Derek Carr is a value, 6,100, makes plenty of sense. But I really like Kyle Allen as my probably favorite value. I mean, Dwayne Haskins isn't the worst value play. He's expected to start this week for the Redskins. I believe he's going to start for the rest of the season. Pretty sure that he's going to start for the rest of the season. Great matchup at home against the Jets. 4,800 though. I mean, it's hard to go to him in cash games when you can get Kyle Allen for just 500 more, who I'd feel much safer with. But I did want to talk about Haskins because he's so cheap and the matchup is good as well. But that's just kind of where I'm looking to at quarterback. Mainly really like Kyle Allen. I think Derek Carr makes a lot of sense in GPPs. Jameis Winston I like in the 6K range. I'd try and pay up for Lamar Jackson in tournaments if possible. Guys like Dak Prescott you could definitely get some exposure to. Jimmy Garoppolo as well. I usually only play about 3 or 4 lineups though. I'm not like a 150 guy. I don't play 150 lineups. So I do try and narrow down my player pool to about 3 or 4 quarterbacks because I know I just can't get exposure to every quarterback. The guys I'm really looking at are like Jackson, Allen, Carr, and then obviously Winston as well. Kind of the same on Yahoo. You could pay it for Jackson, but I really like Winston at 31. For value, I really like Allen at 27, Carr at 27. It's kind of where I'm going to be going at quarterback for Yahoo. But now moving on to running back. Christian McCaffrey is going to be a guy that I try and pay up for this week on both sides. So at home against the Falcons, great spot for him. He's still too cheap on DraftKings, which is crazy to say. 10,500 is still too cheap of a price tag for McCaffrey with how good this guy's been. He's still underpriced on Yahoo as well at $41. I'm going to be jamming him in on both sides. In cash games, I think Christian McCaffrey is a pretty easy play this week. I noticed a lot of sharp players last week did not pay up for Christian McCaffrey in cash games, which is kind of weird. I thought McCaffrey was just a lock and load. I think he's a lock and load this week. This Falcons defense is just so bad. They do struggle against pass-catching running backs. They have struggled this season, especially as of late. Whenever they have faced pass-catching running backs, they have struggled, and we know McCaffrey can obviously do that. He gets a ton of volume regardless. I mean, the dude's going to play a ton of snaps. He's going to be on the field a ton. He's their goal line back. He's their pass down back. He's pretty much everything for this team. I don't need to tell you that Christian McCaffrey is a good play this week. You should already know that. So for like GPPs, you could obviously pivot to Elliott or Cook. I mean, if you wanted to do that, I think that would make some sense. Dalvin Cook, tough matchup against Denver, I would say. But 8,900, I mean, this guy just gets so much volume. If you're going to get a running back that gets 25 to 30 touches, Dalvin Cook's going to be that guy. He gets Christian McCaffrey type usage, 20-plus carries in the running game. He's going to get 5 to 6 targets just about every week. For sure, and play at 8,900 as a tournament pivot off of McCaffrey. I don't expect Cook to have much ownership this week. I don't see Elliott having much ownership as well. Now, I do want to talk about some plays over on Yahoo. So on Yahoo, I would say it's a bit of a different story. I mean, you got Elliott for $7 less. You got Cook for $9 less. In cash on Yahoo, if you can find a way to fit like one of those two guys in with McCaffrey, I think that makes plenty of sense. I don't think that's going to be the optimal way to go, though, because you do have guys that are really underpriced on Yahoo. Leonard Fournette really stands out to me over here. He's only $23 against the Colts. This Colts run defense hasn't been that great this season. They do rank towards the bottom of the league in run defense. Fournette's coming off a bad game last week against Houston in that London game where he only had 11 carries, 40 yards, 5 catches for 32 yards. We still know that Leonard Fournette is one of the most used running backs in the league. I mean, his workload, his usage is absolutely insane. I love him here on Yahoo at $23. He really stands out as just being too cheap. The fact that you're getting him for cheaper, or the fact that he's cheaper than like Le'Veon, Marlon Mack, Todd Gurley, makes him a standout play on Yahoo at only $23. On DraftKings at $7,900, there's probably other guys I'd look to. Like I'd rather save $500, even though it's a tough matchup for Kamara, $7,400 for Alvin Kamara. Even in a tough matchup against the Bucs, that's a team that's very tough to run on. But we know they will struggle in the pass. Alvin Kamara is one of the best pass-catching running backs, so he's a good tournament play as well. I think for cash games, though, to find a guy with pair with Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs is someone that really stands out, 6,900. I did talk about Derek Carr, like using Derek Carr as leverage off of Josh Jacobs. That makes plenty of sense in tournaments, but I think for cash games, you just lock and load Josh Jacobs this week. The workload has been there the last few weeks, getting 15 to 20 carries. He's seeing a little bit of work in the pass game as well. This is a game where I expect him to see a ton of volume. Right now, the Raiders are big favorites in this game, 11-point home favorites. I mean, this is just such a good spot for Josh Jacobs. Really, the only way he busts here is if, I guess, he doesn't score the touchdowns, which seems surprising. I mean, I feel like he can get into the end zone at least once or twice in this game. This Bengals defense has been towards the bottom of the league in run defense, so Jacobs should easily be able to go for over 100 yards if he gets the volume, which he should. I mean, the pass down work, it doesn't really matter. I mean, they're going to be ahead in this game for a large majority of the game, so he's going to be on the field regardless. He's going to play a ton of snaps regardless, so love Josh Jacobs here. I think he's one of the standout plays on the slate at 6,900. Just such a good spot. He should feast in this matchup. Also think Tevin Coleman is a great play this week as well, especially if Matt Breida sits. That's still some news we're waiting on, along with Emmanuel Sanders. Some of this 49ers news we are waiting on. It doesn't look like Matt Breida is going to play this week, which would open up more usage and more volume for Tevin Coleman. It's been a pretty even split so far this season between Coleman and Breida. It's been about a 50-50 split. I expect it to be more of like a 70-30 split this week. If Breida sits, you'll see 70% of the volume go to Tevin Coleman. We'll see Raheem Mostert get some volume as well, probably about 25 to 30% of the touches. It's a great spot for Tevin Coleman at home against a bad Cardinals defense. 6,100 for Coleman if Breida sits. He really stands out in that mid-range. I have a feeling, though, the way to go in cash game this week is probably going to be to pay up for McCaffrey, go with Josh Jacobs at running back as your RB2, and then save with a cheap play that we'll talk about in a second. But if you want to get off that cheap play, or if you want to play Coleman over Jacobs, I don't think that's a terrible move at all. But some of these mid-range options, I mean, no core plays stand out for me here besides Brian Hill as a value. I do like Brian Hill quite a bit in cash games this week. I think in tournaments, he's going to be pretty popular. I would imagine he is projected to be one of the highest owned running backs. He is going to start since Devontae Freeman is out. I mean, it's a really good matchup. The Panthers have struggled against the run this season. They have been one of the worst run defense, or have had one of the worst run defenses. At 4,800 in tournaments, I think you can definitely look elsewhere. I mean, there's other guys you could pivot to. Just if you could like find a couple $100, you could get up to someone like maybe even Devin Singletary. I know that's a $1,200 difference, but Devin Singletary against the Dolphins is a great pivot off of Brian Hill, even though it's a pretty big salary difference. I mean, even someone like James White, a really good pass-catching back against the Eagles team that we know funnels to the pass. They've really struggled against the pass this season. Their secondary's been really bad this season. It's tough to run on the Eagles. We know James White's not going to be used as a true running back. I mean, they're going to use him in the passing game mostly. So 5,400 as a pivot off of Brian Hill in tournaments, that would make a lot of sense. I think for cash, you probably just lock in Brian Hill, though, as a value. He's really cheap on Yahoo. I think that's where he really stands out. He's still so cheap over here, $14. I'm for sure going to have him in my Yahoo core this week. He just really stands out as one of the best values. It's hard to get away from him in cash games. Like I said, there's tournament pivots you could look to. You could just go full jam in the expensive running backs and then go cheap at receiver. That makes plenty of sense. But as a core play, I want to stick to Brian Hill for value. You could definitely play him on Draftkings as well. He's probably the best flex play, RB3 play to go along with McCaffrey and Jacobs. But let's go ahead and talk about some wide receivers now. So with Michael Thomas being priced up to 9,900, it's hard for me to trust him in cash games this week, at least at that salary. It's hard for me to play him over Christian McCaffrey. Last week I was able to get Thomas and McCaffrey in my cash game lineup. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that this week. Now for tournaments, I mean, obviously Michael Thomas has a ton of upside. It's a great matchup. This Buccaneers defense, their secondary is one of the worst in the league. Like I said earlier, this is a tough team to run on, so I expect Drew Brees to be throwing a lot in this game. He's obviously going to look to Michael Thomas a ton. Michael Thomas just gets 10 to 12 targets every week. You can pretty much pencil him in for 20 DraftKings points. He's a fine GPP play. For cash games, it's really hard to get to him, though. For GPPs, I'd probably only be targeting him if I'm stacking this game, and I'm stacking him with Brees and then running it back with one of the Tampa Bay receivers. I think the Tampa Bay receivers are probably my favorite receivers to pay up for on this slate if I'm going to pay up. I really like Chris Godwin at 7,300. We don't know yet the status of Marshawn Lattimore. He did not practice on Thursday. That's very likely that he misses this game. it would become a much easier matchup for both guys. I would imagine that Lattimore shadows Evans if Lattimore plays, which would make it a pretty easy matchup for Chris Godwin. Regardless, though, if Lattimore's out, I think both guys I have a ton of interest in, especially on Yahoo. I really like Jameis Winston, so I'm probably going to be looking to pair him with one of his receivers, at least in tournaments. Don't know if you need to do that in cash. But you have Evans at 36, Godwin at 32. I think just given the salary savings, I'd probably rather play Godwin at $32 $32 with the $100 difference on DraftKings. It's very close, but I'll side with Godwin at 7,300. I think he just sees so much volume. I mean, both guys are going to get targeted. It's hard to predict which guy's going to have the better game, but I'll just lean with Godwin here at 7,300. But for cash, we are going to need to save at receiver this week. I mean, if we're trying to pay up for McCaffrey in cash games, we're definitely going to need to find some value. Before we do touch on those value plays, I want to hit on a couple guys I'm targeting in this mid-range. John Brown I like quite a bit against the Dolphins, especially if you want to play Josh Allen. Josh Allen's a solid QB option this week. If you're looking to stack him with one of his receivers, I mean, John Brown is clearly the guy you want to look to. 6,400 and a pretty good matchup against the Dolphins. DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, I think both make a lot of sense to stack with Kyle Allen. Both still feel underpriced for this matchup. DJ Moore, 5,900. Curtis Samuel is 5,300. You could definitely target both those guys in this spot. There's so many other values as well that I see, like Terry McLaurin against the Jets, I like a lot. Terry McLaurin has had a lot of tough matchups lately. He's someone I'll for sure have exposure to in tournaments. Finally gets a good matchup here after 3 really tough matchups against the 49ers, the Vikings, and the Bills. Now he gets to face this really bad Jets secondary. Terry McLaurin, we know, is going to play a ton of snaps. He's going to get targeted a ton. He does have a connection with Dwayne Haskins. So I like McLaurin as a GPP option at 5,600. Same with Calvin Ridley as well. I think Calvin Ridley honestly might be a guy you can consider in cash games this week against the Panthers. I believe James Bradberry is expected to play this week, so he will most likely be shadowing Julio Jones. Calvin Ridley should see plenty of volume, especially with Austin Hooper out. That's pretty big for this Falcons team. That's going to open up a lot of targets for Calvin Ridley. We'll talk about Russell Gage, who should see more volume as well with Hooper out. Calvin Ridley makes a lot of sense at 5,500. Mohamed Sanu's coming off a monster game last week with the Patriots, saw 14 targets against the Ravens, 10 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown. Now he gets a really easy matchup against a bad Eagles secondary. You could for sure look to Mohamed Sanu as a value. There's just so much value at receiver this week. I feel like it's going to be easy to go with a couple cheap receivers and then pay up for like McCaffrey in cash games. That's going to be the route to go this week. But now for like 4K and below, there's a couple guys I want to hit on. So right now we don't know the status of Emmanuel Sanders, at least as of Friday. Last week with Emmanuel Sanders injured, we knew George Kittle was going to be out for that game. We got 8 catches for Deebo Samuel, 11 targets, 112 receiving yards, 22 DraftKings points last week in that Monday night game against Seattle. He for sure benefited in terms of targets with Emmanuel Sanders out. Once Sanders went down, it was pretty easy that Deebo Samuel was going to be the guy that was going to get targeted the most. I think regardless though, even if Sanders plays, there should still be plenty of targets for Deebo Samuel since George Kittle is going to be out for this game. If we do look at snap count from last week, Deebo Samuel did play the most snaps. He's played since week 1, played 83% of the snaps. Kendrick Bourne was someone that saw the most increase in snaps, but that probably had to do with Emmanuel Sanders getting injured. Once Sanders got injured, we saw Kendrick Bourne on the field a lot. I have a feeling in 2 wide receiver sets, it's going to be Samuel and Sanders. If Sanders plays, if Sanders is out, then we're going to see a lot of Deebo Samuel and a lot of Kendrick Bourne. I really like Deebo Samuel on both sides. I mean, he's dirt cheap on DraftKings. He's dirt cheap on Yahoo as well. 4K on DK, $13 on Yahoo. I think he's one of the top value receivers this week, regardless of Emmanuel Sanders plays. But if Emmanuel Sanders is out, I think he's one of the clear just go-to options for value at receiver. So he's a guy that I like a ton. Definitely going to be plugging him into the DraftKings core. I do want to talk about Russell Gage as well. I think Russell Gage makes a lot of sense as a value receiver this week. I talked about him in the first look video. He's dirt cheap on both sites. He's 3,300 on DraftKings. So he should really benefit from Austin Hooper being out for this game. I mean, he's benefited since Mohamed Sanu got traded. He has seen more snaps, more targets. Just the last 2 weeks, 9 targets, 5 targets in that Week 10 game against the Saints. Now with Austin Hooper out, I expect Gage, Julio, and Calvin Ridley to get most of the volume from the Falcons receivers. I expect those guys to see the most targets. We know this is a Falcons team that's going to throw the ball a lot. Really like Russell Gage as a value. Him and Deebo Samuel are probably going to be the 2 values I use the most this week. once we get the news on Sanders, I'm not sure if I'll go with Samuel in cash games if Sanders is in, because it might be a bit risky. If Sanders is out, though, I think Samuel's just a lock and load. Russell Gage, though, should definitely benefit from Austin Hooper being out. That opens up a lot of targets. He's so cheap on DraftKings at $3,300. He's going to open you up that salary to get those expensive running backs that you want to pay up for Christian McCaffrey. If you want to try and pay up for Lamar Jackson, a quarterback, in cash this week, you're going to need to save a receiver. And I think that's where both Samuel and Gage come in. I believe Gage is $12 on Yahoo. You could definitely target him on Yahoo as well, but I don't think he's as necessary just because there's a lot of other underpriced guys over on Yahoo. But now we'll quickly run through the tight end and defense position. So tight end, I'm probably going to be saving here if possible. If I'm paying up, my favorite guy to go to on DraftKings to pay up for is Darren Waller, $5,500 at home against the Bengals. I mean, this is just one of the best fantasy tight ends. He's been like on a downswing these last few weeks. The targets haven't been as high as I would like, just 2 and 5 targets the last 2 weeks. But he's still a guy that's going to see a ton of volume. It's a good matchup, a bad Bengals defense. $5,500 for Darren Waller. If I can fit him into my main cash lineup, I'll for sure be trying to do so. But we've got some value at the tight end position. Greg Olsen at $3,900, for sure going to have some exposure to this week. Eric Ebron saw a lot of volume last week, and he's really benefited since T.Y. Hilton got injured. Saw his role really increase last week against the Dolphins, had 12 targets, 5 catches for 56 yards. He's played the most snaps that he's played all season. We'll pull it up real quick just so I can show you guys. Last season, we'll take out the 49ers, and then we'll put the Colts in there. So last week at the tight end position, you look at the tight end snap percentage, 61% of the snaps played by Eric Ebron, 60% by Jack Doyle. I expect Ebron to be heavily targeted again. They'll use him out wide as well. They'll run him in the slot. He did complain about his role. Like after that Pittsburgh game, he was saying like how he wants to be targeted more, and like the squeaky wheel narrative came through, getting 12 targets week 10 against Miami. Eric Ebron as a value tight end makes a lot of sense at $3,600. Ross Dwelley saw 7 targets in that Monday night game with George Kittle out, and now he gets like the best possible matchup against the Cardinals. He could definitely be in play as a value this week. I'd probably feel a bit safer getting up to Ebron for $200 more. You could definitely target Dwelley on Yahoo. Just scrolling through the tight end position on Yahoo. I usually try and save here. If I can pay up though, I really like Waller again on Yahoo at 21. I think Mark Andrews makes a lot of sense at 22. But you got value here with Ebron at 14. O.J. Howard at 13, someone I want to touch on as well. I think he's one of the top values at tight end. He's really cheap on DraftKings as well. I believe he played the most snaps that he has played all season. Finally broke out last week against the Cardinals, going for 4 catches, 47 yards, and a touchdown. I want to pull up the Bucs snap percentage from tight ends last week so we can see O.J. Howard's snap percentage. So he played 99% of the snaps last week. That is absolutely insane. That's the most he's played all season. O.J. Howard definitely in play as a value tight end against the Saints defense that we know you want to target against the pass. Like you want to target with the pass catchers. It's a tough team to run on. So there's so much value at tight end with Ebron, with O.J. Howard, Ross Dwelley. I mean, these are the guys I'm probably going to be looking to in cash. I mean, if I have the salary to get up to Waller, I would like to, because I feel like Waller just gives you so much upside. But there's a lot of good value that I'm going to be targeting this week at the tight end position. So now we'll quickly run through defense before we end the video. So just a couple defenses I'm targeting. I like the Vikings at home against the Broncos. I think they make a lot of sense at $3,400. The Panthers against the Falcons for $3K. This is a Panthers team that gets a lot of pressure on the quarterback. Matt Ryan's probably going to have to throw a lot in this game. They're probably going to be trailing. So the Panthers make plenty of sense at $3K. The Ravens make a lot of sense at $3K as well. I mean, Deshaun Watson's a great quarterback, but he's still a guy that will take a lot of sacks. Their offensive line has struggled this season. The Ravens are playing at home. Ravens make a lot of sense, but honestly, I feel like I'm going to be punting with the Lions defense in cash games this week. It's pretty gross, but the Lions are only $1,800. They're at home against the Cowboys. Dak's been awesome this season. He's been a much better quarterback, but he still will make some mistakes. He will take some sacks. This Lions team, they can get some pressure on the quarterback, and I just don't see like there's not really any standout defenses that I feel like are a must this week. Like last week, once we got the news that Matthew Stafford was going to be out and Jeff Driscoll was going to start for the Lions. That made the Bears defense one of the top defense options at $3K. I just don't see like a top defense option this week that I feel like I have to have. The Vikings are the one that stands out the most, but honestly, just saving with the Lions, punting at defense, hoping I get 6-7 points from the Lions in cash. It's probably going to be the way that I go, so that way I can pay up for the expensive running backs, expensive receivers that I want. So I think that's it for the final look video, guys. these are kind of like my 5 plays for DraftKings and for Yahoo that I really like. Just taking a final look at this slate on Friday night. These are the guys I have the most interest in going into Sunday. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. As always, I would greatly appreciate it if you would drop a like before you get out of here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Click that notification bell so that way you get notified every time I upload. And as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at DFS by Noah. I am very active over on Twitter. But good luck this week, guys. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.